be able to do that. Okay? Hey, you know what? We're in the book of James. Love this book. The Epistle of James. And you remember that we've studied now through middle of chapter 3. I think a couple of weeks ago we got to chapter 3, verse 12 at the least, talking about taming the tongue. You remember we've been through James chapter 1, learning about how we face tests in our faith. Should we not want test of our faith? No, James teaches us that we should rejoice, right? Because those tests are proof of our faith. That they try us and refine us and make us perfect and complete, as he says in James chapter 1, verse 4. And then as we go down into chapter 1, you remember that a real focus here is that we need to not just hear the word and not only have faith, which itself is a great challenge, but we need to do and act on our faith, don't we? And make that part of who we are. And an example of that comes in chapter 2, just by way of reminder. You remember he starts James chapter 2, verse 1, telling a story about the man who's dressed in shabby clothing, who comes into their midst. And what's the point of that story? They're not supposed to be something, not supposed to show something, not supposed to be partial to people based upon their physical status. We're not supposed to act in ways that don't have the faith of Jesus. Jesus was someone who treated everyone without respect of persons. In other words, he treated them all as children of God. And in fact, God has chosen the poor to be rich in faith. And so just because someone's poor and doesn't have honor in the eyes of the world, we should recognize that doesn't mean God doesn't honor and respect that person. We should treat them accordingly. And so we're supposed to show God's mercy and have the judgment that God has. Talks about that in chapter 2, verse 13. And then he continues in chapter 2, repeating this idea of, faith without works is dead. That we need to be someone who doesn't just say, I care for you, but shows it. The brother or sister who is in need, our faith kicks into action if we have true faith. And so like Abraham, our faith will make us righteous when we act on it, and we will be a friend of God. He talks about that in chapter 2, verse 23 and 24. And so in chapter 3, we talked last time about the primary example of how our faith should work in our life has to do with this powerful little muscle in our mouth. Uses that example of the tongue. And the tongue is just a great example of how when we believe and we trust and we are loyal to God, it should change the way that we talk and the way that we use our tongue. Is that easy to do? No, and none of this is easy, but he uses the tongue and its small nature as an example of how we should be steering ourselves and should be controlling ourselves, because our actions not only affect us but affect others. And we're going to emphasize that here in this class as we get down to chapter 3. He's really talking about not only how we act, but how our actions affect others. We get a little indication of this in verse 9, where he's talking about how the tongue should be consistent with our character. We should be people who can tame that tongue. And he says in verse 9 of chapter 3, with it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are being made in the likeness of God. And this introduces the idea that our works of faith are important not only because it shows our faith about ourselves, but it impacts everyone around us. God didn't make us to be solitary creatures. You remember when Adam was made, he looked at Adam, and what was the first problem that God saw with Adam? What was the problem with Adam? He was alone. And you see God made him someone who completed him, or at least someone who who gave strength to his weakness. And that was the woman. And so even there you get an indication we're supposed to be around other people. We're not by ourselves. And so around other people we need to be able to conduct and talk to others as we should. So this is going to get us into a section here in the second half of chapter 3, and then we're going to go down into chapter 4. Our lesson today will bring us all the way down. We'll see how far we get to verse 12. We have a little bit of overlap next week, and so we may just get down to verse 10. But a lot of this has to do with how we treat others. And so now he's talked about the tongue being a source of problem, okay? Now he's going to say, you know, the other problem is not just our tongue, it's our heart and the passions, the desires that are in that. And so why don't we do what we want to do? Why do we sin? He's going to do kind of an autopsy and kind of cut us open, spiritually speaking, and explain, you know, what is it that causes us to not act on our faith? And he's going to share with us that it has everything to do with our hearts. And so let's pick up in chapter 3, verse 13. We're going to talk about true wisdom and then how we should relate to the world and our desires. Those are kind of the focus here. So this is about why we don't act on our faith. Okay, so he's going to help us understand and give us a diagnosis and an antidote or some cures for that. Okay, you ready? Let's learn about ourselves. So he asks again in chapter 3, verse 13, having talked about our tongue, he says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Who has a knowledge that can be truly put into good practice? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom." Okay, so meekness, as we talked about last time, is a humility that is really willing to be lowly and to put others and to put God first, not just ourselves. And that's hard to do, but we're supposed to show our wisdom by our good conduct. We're acting out of the right heart. And he says this in verse 14. He says, "But by contrast, as opposed to those who are conducting themselves wisely and meekly, if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth." So this "if" is kind of a what would you say, a rhetorical if. The idea is there anybody who doesn't have at some point bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in their heart? No, he's being rhetorical. He's saying, I know you all have it, but when that arises, that bitter jealousy. So jealousy is a disposition, an attitude towards someone else, right? And when you're jealous towards someone else, and it's a bitter jealousy, what does that mean? If you have jealousy, you what? You want what they have, right? You whether it's some sort of reputation or fame or possession. And if it's bitter, it's even worse, because not only do you want what they have, you're angry and upset, you're embittered because they have it, right? So it's not that, Kim, I want your green shirt. That's not the only problem. It's that I'm upset that Kim has the green shirt, right? And so it's not only about me, it's something hostile towards the other person. So that is a bad relationship, right? And it gets to kind of the hatred, the anger that we can have in our heart. So you have that desire for other people which doesn't want them to have it. And then the second thing he says is selfish ambition. What's ambition? If you're ambitious, what do you want? You're going after something. You're wanting things that will lift you up in status and power and reputation. I'm ambitious. I'm a politician. I'm a local politician here in Spring Hill, but I'm ambitious. That means that I want to be more, right? So it's ambitious. Now, if my desire is to be a politician in the state level in order to serve other people, I have talents, I have interest, I have a vision. Is ambition necessarily a bad thing? No, right? A wife and a woman and a man gets married and they have an ambition to have children, right? Is that a bad thing? No. I have an ambition to be more evangelistic. Not a bad thing. The problem is when that desire to be more is wholly focused upon your own desires, your own self, your own selfish things, right? So he's saying if you have desire what other people have and it's a hatred or anger at them, and if you want to be more and it's wholly so that you can spend it upon your own self and kind of improve yourself just for yourself's sake, he says if you have those things in your heart, and we all do at some point, right? He says if you have that, do not boast and be false to the truth. Now this is an important point. The idea is that just because you have those desires in your heart, right, to take that green shirt and to steal it from him, which would be untrue, or to somehow become a big politician so I can make a lot of money and do what I want, do we have to act on those desires? Okay, this is a key point, right, is that we have those desires, we're tempted for those things, but if we have those, don't be lured by those desires. Don't then say, "Ooh, I'm gonna talk about what a great person I am," or I'm gonna lie and cheat to get those things, right? This gets back to a point I want to remind you of in chapter 1. Look with me back at chapter 1, and he's talking about how we go through these trials so that God can test us and bring us home and give us a crown of life. And you remember what he says? He says in chapter 1, verse 13, he says, "Don't you say that I'm being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he tempts no one. Does he try us? Yes. Does he tempt us? No." God doesn't lure us into sin. But verse 14, he says, "Each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire." Right? So I have a desire for something. Do I need to act on that desire? No. No. When I go out fishing, I can see the little fishes, or the big fishes as the case may be, they're circling around that lure. Are they being tempted by it? Oh boy, they can feel that in their stomach, right? But they know enough, they got to be cautious. They have fish friends that tell them about Fred the fish that got picked up by the fishermen, and so they know, they've seen this happen. And so they're cautious and they're not lured by that temptation, right? They're not brought in. And his point here is that we have desires. Do we need to act on those? No. The desires themselves are not sinful, right? If I see that shirt that black shirt that Christian has on, or whatever that is, my first reaction is, "Oh man, I like that black shirt. Man, he looks so good in that. I wish he didn't have it." That's my bitter jealousy. Okay. Now I can begin to control that. The more mature you are, but that desire itself is not sinful necessarily. But if I then say, "You know what, I'm going to work things to where I get that shirt from him," false to the truth, that's being lured by my desire. And so what he's saying in this verse is, he says, look, if you have those things in your heart, be aware of it, suppress that, but don't act on that. Don't be boastful, don't be false to the truth. Yeah, Roy?
Yeah, it's the same thing. We all have desires and
Yeah.
temptations.
Yes.
But we can think of it, but we don't have to follow through.
That's
So
right.
when we follow through those temptations and desires, that's when trouble comes.
That's right. That's right. That
Because I can right now, I can say, well, I'm going to go wrong thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's hearsay.
Right.
Okay, now until I act upon that,
Yes.
really go fully through the motions,
Yes.
then that's when it becomes a stumbling block.
Absolutely. And the wisdom of, and what he's talking about here is, okay, those desires come to us, and sometimes they just are on us, and you have it, and just because you have that desire, you have these desires in you, these feelings, these emotions, these dispositions, that itself is human. We have desires. But the question is, we're going to be lured by that. But what he's going to tell us is, hey, you know what? If you can get out ahead of those desires, you know what causes those desires. I know every time I see a black shirt, I've got to have it. So what do? When I walk in and I see that black shirt in the corner of my eye, I just don't look at it. I mean, that's not joking. I mean, you just kind of learn how to direct your eyes, your attention. He's going to be talking to us about wisdom. Wisdom says, I know where my sin comes from. I know it. I know so what you do is you say, I'm just not going to look at the lure. I'm not going to look at the black shirt or whatever that is, right? That's wisdom. Yeah.
The law came and revealed sin in man, right?
That's right.
So, as you were speaking, I was thinking about when I was a child. jealous or something, but I was so honest with myself that, well, he has it, I don't, what can I do? You know,
Yeah.
I don't,
That's right.
my income, I don't have the income to afford that.
That's right.
So, but as you get older, and it's something, you know, that desire, you don't really see it. I saw it when I was a child, but I didn't understand it.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
Well, as I grew as a man, and then as I grew in my life, I've been through a lot of trauma.
Sure.
So it disconnected me emotionally that I didn't notice the desires
Absolutely.
that were sinful.
Yes.
And I thought they were normal.
Yes.
And me doing something negative to somebody, making them feel that, to me, it's okay. It's not wrong.
But there's just such a
You know,
much.
it's like they say,
Yeah.
whatever, like the word, what's good.
Yes.
is-
Yeah.
What's bad is good.
Yeah. Yeah. We call back. We don't know the difference. You haven't had your conscience, your sense of right and wrong exercised, informed to the point that you know what is right and wrong. A couple things you said. One, you said, when I was a kid, you know, I saw something, somebody had something, I didn't have the money, so I didn't even think to desire, because and the word that I would use there's a certain meekness there. In other words, you know, you understood how low you were in the economic totem pole. You know, you didn't have, and so it's like I don't have the power to even imagine that I could have that. And you know what? That's a really important point. That comes to you by birth. You know, you kind of just don't have the money. It also comes to you by practice, because the idea is, you know, one reason we sin is because we know we have the power to have something, whether it's a quick fix of a drug or, you know, an ability to attract a certain person. That power will exercise that for sin. And a wise Christian knows, just because I have the ability to get that thing or to draw that thing to me, doesn't mean I should exercise that power. So, you know, I may have the money to go out and buy a new sports car, or to go out and, you know, buy something that would be bad for my, or go out and buy a pack of cigarettes. I have the ability to go out, and I got $5 or whatever it is, you know, to go out there and get that. What's that? What's that? $10 now? That's right. Okay, $10. That's right. Yeah. Ismail informed me that it's now $10. So, but you see my point. Meekness says, even though I don't have even though I have the power to have those things, I'm going to lower myself to not use that power. And you know, and the second thing you said is, I mean, I just relate to that so much. It's like, you know, I didn't even know, you know, what sin was, really. And so I was just doing these things. And that's what he's talking about here, is wisdom. You know, a lot of the people just don't even know that things they're engaged in, number one, is wrong. It's more of a no than want to let on about it, to be honest. But maybe they don't know fully. And they don't know kind of where that's coming from. They're not reflecting on themselves and say, hey, man, that's just selfish, or that's just bitterness, right? So this is a great blessing, just to know these things, isn't it? To be able to self-diagnose. So wisdom is being able to head off those desires that would lure us into sin, right? Example of this, and then Roy, right now I got a note today from someone who I'm going to talk to in a couple days, and it just made me so upset. It was so unfair, okay? And so I know that if I go into that conversation with that person, that attitude right now, it's going to get heated, it's going to be hot, it's going to be bad. And so what I know is I've got to get my mind in a mindset in advance of that meeting to where I can internalize what was said, take it for what it's worth, and be able to constructively respond to that person. If I don't, then I will go into that, I will get angry, and I will sin. Okay, now pray for me, because I don't know how wise I am in this. But the idea is that that's taken however many years of wisdom to know, when I get that stuff, I got to prepare my heart, or else I'm going to hit that and it's going to blow up, you know. That's what he's talking about. Where does that wisdom come from? It's not me. God's taught me that, you know, I need to be a peacemaker. I need to not be selfish. And so, it's not easy. But yeah.
Like you said, well, wisdom comes from God, and
That's
this
it.
sin comes from the heart.
That's right. That's it. And even worse, he's going to tell us that sin in our heart, you're right, it comes from somewhere else. It's even more insidious. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of wisdom, all things are
Right.
in a sense.
Yes. Yes.
But is it right for me?
Right.
So
Great.
we got to discern just because, okay,
Yeah.
I'm okay from 18 to 21.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a Christian. It's lawful for me to get alcohol
Yeah.
or so desire.
Right.
Is it expedient?
Yeah. That's right.
So what I'm going to profit from this?
Yeah.
So it's a wager between, okay, these things I can commit myself to, but it's those things contrary if I indulge in
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah. Not maybe even lawful for us in saying something to somebody. If I was to say, Kim, I'm gonna pick on Kim. Kim, I just didn't like the way you looked at me when you came in tonight. Now, I'm just being honest. That's what people say. I'm just being honest. So is it lawful to be honest? Well, yeah. But is that edifying? Is that making for, love? And no. And to your point, whether it's being able to go out legally and buy alcohol is really good for you, or being able to tell somebody just the honest truth, but realize that's really damaging to our relationship. To your point, we got to be wise on what are going to be the effects of the desires in our heart. It does. And boy, we all need it. So that's why he's talking about it. He's saying, look, if you have those desires in your heart and you act on them, look at verse 15. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, from God. Okay? But it's earthly. You're learning it from people on the earth. It's what the world does, right? It's worldly, as we would say. It's unspiritual. What does unspiritual mean? Well, it means that it's not something that makes for a good relationship with God. Spiritual means your relationship with God, right? And so I'm acting on just worldly, just kind of human relationship. And it's demonic, okay? So, there are forces at work in this world. Some are good, some are bad. And those forces which, I see on the TV people acting a certain way. I see in the world people acting a certain way or telling me, those are from Satan. Satan tells us what? Lie, cheat, fulfill your desires, right? Live for the moment, right? Be contrary to things that are of God, right? All of those things, that's what Satan's trying to get us to do, right? And so when Satan tempted Jesus, what did he say? Fill your gut, satisfy your desires, right? Throw yourself down for the temple and prove your God. In other words, people are, the world is putting you down. You need to assert your pride. Prove yourself, right? And then if you can be ruler of all of these things, he says, and that's about power, right? Satan wants us to be prideful, powerful, and fulfill our passions. That's what Satan wants, right? And so he says those kind of things are from Satan. They're demonic. Satan has demons, minions that work for him, and they're all around. So verse 16, he says, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, again, that's what he was talking about before, there will be disorder and every vile practice. So he said, look, don't act on those desires, but just know that if you've got those desires and if you're not heading them off with the wisdom of God, right, from heaven, then you can just eventually, if you allow those desires in your life, no matter how much you try to control them, there will be disorder. We in our house, when the kids get to fighting, that happens every now and then, I'll listen to it and I'll think, this is crazy. This is I don't use the word disorderly. I say this is chaos, And so when we start to fight, that's when disorder, chaos results. In a marriage, right? In a family, in a business, in our church. And then every vile practice. Now that's a word, vile. You have like bad, evil, and vile, right? Vile is the worst of the worst. It would be bad for me to steal Christian's black shirt. It would be vile for me to kill him so I could get his shirt. And you can think about things I could do even worse than that, right? So the idea is these are desires that produce the worst of the worst in our lives. My worst moments have come when I was being selfish. How about you? You know, and that's what he's saying. You would not believe what comes from that.
I think
Yeah.
also it gives you believe these thoughts that are real.
Yes. That's right.
You're not sold on it.
That's right. And the one thing you point out is vile practice. We talked about this before. It's not just acting with our hands, it's acting with our mind. You know, I deal with a lot of kids oftentimes who are engaged in stuff online, whether it's gambling or just other addictions, and they are engaged in selfish behaviors just to gratify themselves, right? And the stuff they'll do is just, they're not killing anybody. They're not really harming anybody. The vile stuff is in their hearts and the minds. Excuse me. And so you have that, those practices are not only physical, they're mental, right? So what is he saying? He says, look, you need to have wisdom from above, and if you have these desires, don't act on them, but just recognize that you need to have the wisdom from above that doesn't even lead to those desires. Learn how to avoid those. Now the good news comes in verse 17. This wisdom that helps you control those desires, maybe even avoid them and not act on them, is from above, is first pure, right? There is this desire, there's this cleanness to it, right? It's right and it's wholly right. You know, to think about, if I'm going to be pure, I'm going to have one desire, one will, and I'm going to seek to avoid sin, right? Some Christians I know, they're what I call percentage Christians. They're like, you know, if I can just have 40% of my life or 60% of my life good, that kind of outweighs the 40%, right? I just need to have a majority of it good, right? Is that being pure? No, that's impure, right? That's the what is it when you take lemonade and tea and pour them together? What do you call that drink? Anybody know? It's named after a famous golfer, Arnold Palmer, right? It's the Arnold Palmer approach to Christianity. You know, I'm going to mix sin and good in my life, and it'll be good enough, right? And we're all guilty of that. We kind of think about, you know, I'm mainly good. But the wisdom from above says, no, be pure. Be pure. Hold yourself to a high standard, knowing that you'll fail at times. And then, here comes the other people, peaceable. Peaceable. So think about that. Peace-able. Okay, so if Judy and I are engaged in a conversation, I can't control it if she's going to do her normal thing and just go off on me and start yelling at me. You know, that's how Judy is, you know. I can't control that. But what I do is I approach her in a way where we are able to stay at peace, right? I know if I go in and I say, you know, Judy, you know, I just really hope that shoulder keeps hurting. Well, that's not making for peace. No, it's not. That's upsetting. And so, but what we're doing is, I can't control how other people act, but what I can control is, are my actions making a path for peace? And that's the wisdom from above. And so, we should try in every interaction to what? Be making for peace. You know, I wake up in the morning, I see my wife, the question is, what can I do to have peace with her? That's the wisdom from above, right? Okay? Yeah.
When you're trying to think, to try to make peace, it always says slow to speak.
That's right.
Quick to hear, so you got to think before you just blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He says in James chapter 1, verse 19, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, right? Doesn't provide the right things, he said, if you're angry. It's exactly right. That's the way we make for peace. We're quick to ponder, we're slow to pounce. Okay, so gentle, you know, this idea that I'm not going to be someone whom is exerting myself in a way that roughs people up or that creates rancor and disagreement. I wrestle with this one because sometimes you have to, you know, so I tend to be someone who's very direct, right? And so if someone says something that's stupid, you know, I'll tend to say, well, that's stupid, you know? And I said, I have a problem with that. I'm just going to tell you, because what I have learned is that directness offends, and it ends up turning people away. And rather than being so direct, I need to be more gentle, right? And oftentimes, what do they say about the, you attract more flies. How's that saying go? Honey, right? Than vinegar or whatever it is, right? And so gentleness is a virtue. It's especially hard for men, because I know women first it's hard for too, because we tend to be we tend to think that our identity, our worth is based in our ability to take action, be forceful, solve the problem, and that tends to be at times too rough. And our Lord was someone who said, what am I? I'm gentle. He says, I'm gentle, right? And meek, lowly in heart. So Jesus, he could drive the money changers out of the temple. He was a strong, powerful person when he needed to be. But he was clearly someone who had strength under control, right? And so gentle. And so he's teaching us how do we overcome these desires. And selfish ambition, bitter jealousy comes from an overbearing, forceful, self-assertive sort of personality oftentimes. And so to be gentle, pray for me in that, because I need to be more of that. Okay, not only gentle, but open to reason, right? If you're open for reason, is your hand like this or is it like that? Yeah, it's like the idea is I'm willing to receive the insight that others have. I don't know it all, even though I may think I do. I don't know it all. And so you come in with questions and not exclamations, right? He's taught us this wisdom that avoids these kind of this disagreement and anger and evil. So I'm peaceable, I'm gentle, I'm open to reason. And oftentimes that means I'm not too judgmental. I'm full of mercy. Okay, how does that work? Grace is what? When you give someone something that they don't deserve. Mercy, oftentimes, is when you don't give them something that they do deserve, right? So if I have a son or a daughter who is being stupid, right? And they probably deserve a good kick in the pants or a good kind of a shouting match at them in terms of kind of telling them what for. If I'm going to be merciful, I'm going to say, I'm going to try to direct them, but I'm not going to give them the forceful response that their stupid action deserves, right? I'm going to be merciful. And not only that, I'm not going to just kind of dole that out in little eye droplets. I'm going to be full of that. So if Kathy deserves mercy and Lim deserves mercy and everyone here deserves mercy, I got, 20 people who deserve mercy. How full should my reservoir of mercy be? It's on F. It's full, right? So I'm not just doling that out and saying, oh, I'm empty. I'm always and to everyone, even at the same time. Maybe it's in a group of people. Some Christians will get upset at a church. That church, they're so mean to me, or they don't appreciate, or they don't care, and they'll treat them badly. But if we're full of mercy, should we treat people who have been wrong to us like they deserve to be treated? No. We're going to try to make for peace. That doesn't mean we compromise the truth. We're going to tell them that, but we do it in a loving way. Okay, and then we'll get through this list and get your comments. Full of mercy and good fruits. The idea is that we have the Spirit of God in us, and that's through His Word, and in our actions, we don't get weary in well-doing, as Paul says. The idea is we're going to keep giving. We're going to keep giving. We're full of that. And then finally, he says we're impartial. This gets back to what he said in chapter 2. I'm not going to treat one person differently than the other because I like them or because they can give me something or they're more powerful or more respected. And that's important. And most importantly, sincere. That's the word that means hypocritical, right? The idea is I'm not going to look at you and act a certain way because I know that's what you want or it gets me in good with you, I'm going to be genuine. So he's not saying, this is really key, he's not saying be fake, right? He's saying let that really come from your heart. And that's hard at times because we're doing things we don't necessarily want to do, but we're sincere. We're really meaning what we're doing because we know it's what God calls us to do. I have difficulty with that too. I don't know about you. It's like, I know what I need to do. I'll give you an example. I was at an event recently, and I was trying to show my support for the students there. And so I show up, and I'm there, and I did not want to be there. I did not want to be there. And, I was I was reading my phone, or I'll just kind of be in it. And afterwards, one of the students came to me and says, "You really didn't want to be here, did you?" And I says, "Well, I got to confess, no, I didn't." And what I realized in that moment, it's not enough just to show up. Your heart needs to be in it if it's going to have the good fruit, the good effect that you want it to have. And boy, that's hard on me because sometimes I think just showing up is good enough. And God says it's not good enough just to show up. You need to be sincere in your mercy, in your peaceableness, and your openness. And so he's not just wanting us going through the motions. It needs to be from faith, because faith without works is dead, right? And so, but you need to have work. The works without faith is meaningless because you got to have that, really. Yeah. So.
It reminds me of saying, I'm a fan of martial arts.
Yes.
Bruce Lee was said one time, empty your cup.
Yeah.
So your cup is full.
Yeah.
So you don't understand.
Yes, that's right.
So we have, by me walking with Christ, I constantly have to empty myself.
That's right. That's it. And you realize, we're thinking about, these are pretty heady things. We're talking pretty high-level spiritual questions. And what he's saying is this is like not 101. This is kind of high-level wisdom. This comes from God. And so the reason we need to know this is that if we're going to avoid the desires which create problems with people, we need to think like God thinks and not like humans tend to think. We've got to have another mind in us. That's the mind of Christ, And so do you ever see something through someone else's perspective they share and you act on what they see and not what you see? I do all the time. This week, there's been an issue. My son has needed some support, and I didn't see it. And my wife wrote me. She texted me. She said, "You really need the..." And she didn't put it that way. She says, "Hey, I think Evan could use some encouragement in this area." And I reflected. I said, "Yeah, probably. I did. I really didn't think about that." And so I made an effort to do that this week. And man, he just blossomed. And so the point was I was acting according to the mind of my wife, who saw those things. I didn't see it like she did. And so I stepped into it. I started to live out her wisdom, and it made a difference. That's how are we with God. God's saying, "I see these things. You can't be selfish. You can't be bitter. You can't be ambitious to serve yourself because it just creates all kinds of problems. And you need to be peaceful. You need to be open. You need to be non-judgmental. You need to be merciful." And I don't think that way usually, but he does. And just like I followed the mind of my wife, I need to follow the wisdom of God. And guess what? Good things happen. Good things happen if you do that. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah, that's what we're after.
Being thankful. It clicks. When I'm thankful,
Yes.
it opens up.
That's right.
It opens up
Yeah.
to God.
Yes.
It opens up
Yes.
that I'm appreciated.
Yeah.
Become appreciative and thankful. And it brings a joy and a peace.
Yes. And thankful is another word for being open and acknowledging of God. Because when you're thankful, you're saying, in me, I'm grateful. I acknowledge what God has given me, and that just opens us up to His wisdom, doesn't it? Right? That's why when we give gifts to people, right? Go. It's your birthday. Yeah. Here's a pen, and you say, and one reason I'll give it to you later, and so and one reason we do that, one reason we exchange gifts, is because every gift implies or seeks a certain reciprocity. What I mean by that is, if I give you a gift, I'm not going to say it, but what I'm hopeful is that you will be thankful. You'll give me thanks. And so a gift opens us up to each other. My gift to you, and you say, oh, well, thank you. And that grows our relationship. God has given us wisdom, and it opens us up to Him. And if we open ourselves up to Him, we're even more open to receive the good gifts that come down. That's thankful. You're right. I hadn't thought about that, but thankfulness really does open us up to this wisdom. Yeah, Lynn?
I think there's a place in the Bible that says that we give not expecting anything in return.
Absolutely.
The Gentiles, they.
Yeah.
So when we give to someone we know can never return.
Yes.
What you give.
Yes, that's
and
right.
Say, I'll pay you back.
That's right. Right.
Have you ever had anyone say, I'll pay
Sure.
you back?
Sure.
But you know good and well that
They're not going to do it.
capable of doing it.
Yeah.
But yet I think you give it out of your heart, and no, I'm not expecting back. It's just like to be thankful. I hear going by the house now.
Yeah.
Emergency squad goes by, siren.
Yes.
And as soon as I hear that, I think, please, be with the people,
Right.
whatever.
Yes.
Because a lot of times they don't walk away from it.
Yes.
Just like my wife just passed a bad accident today.
Yeah.
My daughter.
Yeah.
And I thank God that I was hearing from her and not from
Yes.
a state trooper or someone saying, I'm sorry to tell you.
Yes.
And you pray for people every time you think about it. And just like when the motorcycles speed by, fly by, and I pray for that person. It may be the last time that person speeds by, goes around you in your car.
Yeah.
They're gonna fly around you.
Yeah.
You just wonder where
Yeah.
young and everything.
And so you've gotten to the point in spiritual wisdom to where not only are you praying for your own wisdom and for your own peace, but you're praying for those of others who you see making foolish decisions or in a difficult circumstance. And that's how this began. We realize that God is giving to all. And so we're praying not only for ourselves, but for others. And that's what He's wanting. So let's just get the big picture here. He's going to conclude here in this chapter in verse 18. Verse 18. And let's just read the verse. Let's talk about this. He says, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. A harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Okay? This is one of those deep verses, the further you kind of look into it, the deeper it goes. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of having to clean out a couch. I got to clean up the couch, and you reach down in there in the cushion, there's a quarter, okay, I'm going to go back. You go down further, there's $1, or well, there's that brush I lost a year ago. And you keep going, you keep reading, you're like, what's that in there? You just realize there's more and more down. You're like, well, I'm scared of what I'm going to find. Oh, there's a dead body down. No, but you wonder what's down in there. My point is that just like that couch seems to have deeper and deeper depths, this verse has deeper and deeper depths. And so just think about this. He's saying you should have this wisdom which acts without selfishness, which acts without ambition, that seeks the peace, that's open to others, that's seeking to show mercy, that's giving good fruit. And the idea is, okay, why should we do this, and what is its result? He says, okay, the analogy is for farming. He uses an agricultural image, okay? And what he's trying to think, I don't know how many of you ever farmed, but you go out. If you're a farmer, you work on you're in the land. You have a garden, say, and you go out there and you plant. And why do you plant? Anybody? Why do you plant tomatoes? Why do you plant corn? Why do you plant those things? What's the reason? You're gonna receive a harvest, and you go out there and you go down to the grocery store, you buy the burpless, tomatoes or whatever it is, and you plant it, and you don't receive that harvest maybe for months, right? But I'm going to put in place an environment, a context, an experience here, which if I do this, it's going to yield really good things that I and others can enjoy, right? And so he uses that as an example of treating people this way, okay? You treat these people this way, not because it's going to have an immediate, just because I treat you with mercy and peace doesn't mean I'm going to immediately, you're going to come back and say, oh, John, since you're treating me like that, I'm going to treat you the same way. Is that usually how it works? No. You're planting things which might take years, months, years, even a lifetime to result, right? So, right now in this congregation, we're treating each other intentionally, caring for each other, showing up, loving each other. And that has a good effect. But I'm going to tell you, the way you're conducting yourself, the faith you're showing, it'll have effects for years, maybe decades. Just like we're acting the way we are, in part because the people who were here before us kept this building open and served here. We don't even know them, right? But their peacefulness has created a harvest. He says, look, a harvest of righteousness. Righteousness means that the right things, according to God's will, are happening. Okay? In other words, God's going to bless what you do. You're going to produce fruit in your and people's lives. And he says that harvest of righteousness, notice what he says, is sown in a certain way by people trying to do something. So if I go out there and I try to plant my tomatoes, and I leave those tomato seeds out in the sun, or I make them damp to where they get moldy, and I put those in the ground, are they going to harvest? Are they going to produce fruit? No. You got to put those seeds in the ground a particular way, and if I put them in the ground and they're perfect, but I put them way down deep, so they're not going to be able to grow up, or too shallow so they wash away, is that going to produce a harvest? No. So you can't just plant, you've got to plant in a certain way. And how does he say? How do you have to plant God's word and your conduct so that it produces righteousness? How do you have to plant it? You have to plant it in what? Peace, right? And your goal has to be to make peace, right? So back to Kim. I say, Kim, when you came in here, I'm just going to be honest with you because I want us to have a peaceful relationship. I did not like the way you looked at me. Okay. Now, I say I'm wanting to make peace, wanting to have a good relationship, but am I sowing, am I planting in peace? No. Right? Or I could say, Latasha, you know what? I really get along with you. I'll get along with you, and you know what I think we should do is, you and I should go out to the bar together. And let's get along. Let's have fun, right? Just kind of hang out. Now, are we getting along? Yeah, we're having a peaceful relationship, but are we doing something that makes for true peace? No. It matters how you do it and why you do it, right? And the reason should be to have this harmony, this peace in God's eyes. And if we do that, he says, what will God give? He'll give you righteousness. He'll give you peace. And so we just got to have that long-range view, and that wisdom says, hey, if you do things in peace, truly for peace, I'll bless you. I'll bless you. You'll be able to eat that good, juicy tomato, spiritually speaking, And that's true in a marriage, right? And it's true in friendships and families. And so what wisdom should we follow? God's wisdom. All right, we're out of time here today. We didn't get to chapter 4. That's okay. We got 2 classes, and so we have plenty of time to get through chapter 4. We're going to look at desires. Read chapter 4 for next time, and we'll talk about those desires, okay? So, just as a reminder, our time is not God's time. What does Peter say? 1,000 years is as one day, And just keep that in mind in your life. It may very well be that you have had a sin in your life that has lasted. Maybe it's doubt, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's a certain desire that has lasted for 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years, okay? But remember, our sense of time is not God's time. And so if you come to your life, you say, you know what? I am tired of living that life. I'm going to change, I'm going to get help, I'm going to turn my life around. And you think, but I've been doing that for 50 years. God surely is not going to forgive me that. What does God say? Though your sins be as scarlet, what? Make them white as snow. Will he remember our sins anymore when we repent of them? No. Our time, 50 years, is not his time. And a soul, even tonight, that says, I'm going to change, I'm going to repent, God wipes that away. Just remember, our time is not his time. Thanks be to God. You know, and so it's never too late. It's never too late for us to be right with God. I pray that blessing upon you tonight. And so we're going to say a prayer. Would you be willing to lead us in prayer and pray for our congregation, Ismail? I'm sorry, you can't see me. I'm pointing to you. I need to start doing hand signals when Ismail has his glasses off. So would you be willing to pray for us, and we'll conclude.
Father, Lord God, Lord in heaven, holy be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, as in our hearts as it is in heaven. Lead us in the spirit with wisdom, my Lord, to understand the word that you tell us to do, what should we do, how to live, how to think, how to feel something, not to go by emotions, but go by your word, not even by our hearts. Let your word, Father, continue to wash us with your word, give us strength, wisdom, understanding, courage, motivation, Lord. Especially your love, Lord. We hear from your love, show us. Yes, I've given you my Lord, and I said I fell short too, my Lord. Instead of being honest, I went back to see the I'm sorry about that. This tonight I think we make good God was certain. Thank you, Father. We pray that you come as an idea that you would tell my Lord, encourage and strengthen him, heal him, and give him comfort. That illness they are, Lord, whoever they are, and us here too, Father God. Give us strength. Give us the wisdom to make the choices that we need to do. Strengthen these bodies. Be able to move and glorify you. Give us the number. Thank you. Just take us home safely and continue to give us motivation, keep us strong. We desire to understand the word day and night, and we can't be in trouble, and we can't sleep, Lord. We reach out to you in prayer, and your word march on stuff with it. It's so wonderful that there's a calmness that comes over it. Tonight we would, Father God, not just encourage our brothers and sisters, but you would too, Father. As we fall short of the time. Get us home safely tonight, and continue to bless us as we come back here again and worship you as a God. In Jesus' beautiful holy name we pray. Amen. Wow, that's good.